Is companion planting with your tomatoes actually worthwhile? Well, studies show that it actually is, so long as you plant the right companion crops. So in this video, I'll share 9 companion crops that are actually worth planting in your tomato garden. Generally speaking, the more diversity in your garden, the better. More species in the garden brings a greater diversity of insects and soil biodiversity, all of which leads to a more resilient garden ecosystem. I'll be breaking this video down into 3 main categories of companion plants, all of which serve a specific purpose in the garden. And at the end, I'll reveal my favorite. If I had to choose just one companion plant to plant along with my tomatoes, I'll share that with you at the end. So the 3 categories are trap crops, soil improvers, and beneficial insect attractors. I think it's best to grow some from each of these categories to get the benefits of all of them, but if you're dealing with a specific issue, you can narrow it down to which crop is best for you. So let's start with trap crops, and if you're not familiar with the term, basically a trap crop is planted in order to attract pests away from another crop, in this case tomatoes, in order for that crop to take away the brunt of the damage. There are many different crops that are considered trap crops, and they're mostly used in farming scenarios, but you can definitely apply it to the home garden. The first trap crop is nasturtium. This is not only a trap crop, but it's also a beautiful flowering plant, so it has some ornamental value, but it's going to benefit your tomatoes by attracting aphids and whiteflies and flea beetles and some other pests to the nasturtium rather than your tomatoes. Since it's a flowering plant, it will also attract some beneficial insects, some pollinators and other predatory insects to those flowers, but mostly you're looking to deter those aphids and other things that are really attracted to tomatoes and give them something less valuable to you that they would rather feed on. For nasturtium, we like to plant them around the border of the garden or even a few feet away from your garden to halt those pests on their way into your garden and stop them in their tracks. There are 2 types of nasturtium as well. You want to get the ones that aren't climbing, so you don't want them climbing all over your tomatoes and your trellises. I prefer the smaller bush varieties that stay pretty compact. With these, you can plant them around the base of your tomatoes as well. It looks pretty nice when you do that. You have those gorgeous leaves and flowers surrounding your tomatoes and providing their benefit. Marigolds are similar, and a lot of people recommend this as a trap crop as well because they are attractive to aphids as well, but they also attract things like slugs and thrips, and even some nematodes in the soil can be deterred when marigolds are planted around your tomatoes, so you can sort of pick and choose between these 2. Dill is another trap crop that is great for planting next to tomatoes because tomato hornworms actually prefer dill over tomatoes. I've seen this firsthand, and it's actually a lot easier to detect those hornworms and see them on a dill plant because the foliage is much wispier than tomatoes, where they tend to blend in with the large stems. Dill is also, of course, a useful culinary herb, so you'll get that benefit, and when it flowers, it can attract some predatory insects like predatory wasps, which can help deal with pests in the garden as well. The last trap crop is radish, and I love this one because they're so small and they grow really fast, so you can plant them all around your garden, right at the base of your tomatoes or along the edge, interplanted with some other flowers and other companion plants. They're just really easy to pop in any empty spaces in the garden, and they're known for attracting away flea beetles, whiteflies, and leaf miners, which can do some damage to your tomatoes. One more thing on trap crops before I move on to the next category is a lot of people wonder if it's actually making a pest problem worse because those pests are attracted, they can breed and proliferate on that trap crop. This can be true, but more often than not, when those trap crops become infested, beneficial predators are also on their way and will start consuming those before they can get to your cash crop or your tomatoes. And worst case scenario, if you think that pest population is really getting out of control, the aphids are completely rampant and you don't see any signs of beneficials, you can just remove the trap crop entirely, getting it completely out of the garden before it becomes an issue for your tomatoes. Okay, the second category of companions for tomatoes are soil improvers. You may have heard the term nitrogen fixers. There are many crops that actually add nutrition to the soil. The benefit here, of course, is less fertilizer, less need to add nitrogen and other nutrients to the soil to feed your tomatoes. And the first and probably most common example are field peas or beans. These are both legumes, which are nitrogen fixers. Basically, they can take atmospheric nitrogen that is in the air, and sequester it beneath the soil surface along their roots. Now, this does only happen if the rhizobium bacteria is present in the soil, but more often than not, it is already there and it will form a beneficial relationship between the peas and itself. The only thing about these crops is that they're not really meant to be grown alongside your tomatoes throughout the season. You need to terminate the crop at the right time to get the full benefit. So I think the best example are peas, because you can plant them earlier in the season when it's pretty cold and your tomatoes aren't out yet. Let them grow until until they begin flowering, and then cut the crop off at its base, and then just leave that plant matter on the surface of the soil to break down. That way the nitrogen fixation is active in the soil and it will start to disseminate into the soil, where it can later be used by the tomatoes that are coming into the garden soon. Another example of this type of crop are clovers, so crimson clover or white clover. These are commonly used as cover crops, but you can grow them around the base of your tomatoes as long as you're keeping them at bay and trimming them back around when they start to flower. You will get some of that benefit into the soil, and it's also going to protect the soil from soil erosion, moisture loss, and it's going to add some natural organic material back into the soil. And finally, alfalfa is another cover crop that is typically planted on the off season, but this crop does a great job of adding nitrogen to the soil when it's mowed back. Alfalfa is sometimes known as green manure because if you look at some organic fertilizers, you'll often see alfalfa listed as an ingredient for the primary source of nitrogen. So again, you'll probably want to plant this on the off season before your tomatoes go into the garden and mow it back and rake it into the surface of the soil a few weeks before transplanting your tomatoes out. The third category of companion plant is my favorite, which are beneficial insect attractors. These plants are typically flowering plants, which will attract in a wide diversity of different insects. And while those beneficial insects are here, they're going to be reproducing, and larvae of these insects are typically some of the most heavy feeders of pests. So the benefits here are obvious, but in most cases there's also the added benefit of beauty. Most of these, again, are flowering plants, so you can use them to add some aesthetic appeal to your garden as well. The first beneficial attractor is sweet alyssum. This is a low-growing plant that produces tons of white or purple flowers and does a really good job of attracting hoverflies. The next time you're at the nursery, take a close look at the alyssum and you'll probably see these hoverflies, tiny little flies hovering around the surface of the flowers. It just seems like without fail, at least here in New England where we live, these hoverflies just love sweet alyssum. Again, these larvae love to feed on things like aphids and thrips and other small pests that may be attacking your tomato plants. It's also cold tolerant and very easy to grow. It has a very long flowering window, so once it starts flowering in late spring, it'll flower all the way through until the end of fall. Since they're so low growing, you can plant them right around the base of your tomatoes, or you can plant them at the corners of your garden beds. And this happens to be my favorite companion plant for anything in the garden. If I had to choose just one companion to plant, I would have alyssum everywhere. Thankfully, I don't have to narrow it down, but alyssum is just an amazing companion for tomatoes and everything else. But there are some others like calendula, which is a beautiful, easy to grow flowering plant that also has a very long flowering window. It not only attracts those beneficials like predatory wasps, but also will attract some pests away from your tomatoes, so it sort of works as both a beneficial attractor and a trap crop. Calendula flowers are also edible, so you can use them in teas and as a medicinal herb, or for adding beautiful color to things like salads. And the final companion plant for tomatoes that I'd recommend are cosmos. These are a top tier performer. They thrive on neglect. They really don't need all that much attention in the garden. And you can just plant them on the borders of your garden away from your tomatoes, where they'll attract a variety of beneficial insects. You'll see the bees buzzing around these all summer long. Beautiful foliage and flowers in a variety of colors. I wouldn't necessarily recommend planting them right next to your tomatoes because typically tomatoes need more nutrition, and if you over-fertilize cosmos, they may not bloom all that much, and you really do want to make sure that they flower to get the full benefit. You're probably shocked that I didn't mention things like basil or garlic to plant alongside your tomatoes. These are perfectly suitable companions for your tomatoes, but I wanted to focus on some that really provide direct benefit to your tomato plants and will help you get better results with your tomatoes. Leave a comment with your favorite companion plant for tomatoes. I'm always curious to see what other people are growing and what benefit you seem to get out of those plants. Thanks so much for watching Geeky Greenhouse. I'll see you next time.